The explosion of freedom of expression in the 1960s by the baby boomers was a reaction to the turbulence of the preceding world wars and the Great Depression. There was an urgent tendency in this younger generation to explore new forms of music and art, enhanced by the expansion of consciousness through mind-altering substances, as well as the proliferation of popular culture on radio and television through innovations in science. Young people were compelled politically to stand up together for human rights and racial and economic equality. 1967 was a great year, which blew the lid of the bubbling cauldron of music and art with new sounds and visions. There was magic in the air.
Magic Center Amsterdam in the early 60s was a hotbed of alternative creativity. Colorful personas such as Robert Jasper Grootveld, a radical anti-smoking activist and founder of the counterculture Provo movement. Johnny the Self-Kicker Van Dorn, an early poet-rapper. And Bart Hughes, a medical student who decided to create a third eye in his forehead using a dental drill. Simone Postuma, an abstract expressionist painter, and Marijke Koger, a commercial illustrator since the age of 15, met in 1962, and they organized and staged happenings called Stone in the Streets, featuring action painting and avant-garde free jazz by pianist Pete Cowder's Combo, as well as the reveal of Hughes's hotly debated third eye. As he unwound the endless bandage, it read, "Ha ha ha," a cosmic joke. A boutique called The Trend, an early version of the Apple Boutique, on the Prinsengracht, was founded by celebrity hairdresser Mario Wellman. A mixture of boutique, theater, jazz cellar, and art gallery, it was a preparatory center for the appreciation of art forms. A fashion line called Flashing Fashion was launched by Marijke and her best friend from the Art Academy, Josje Lieger. Simon and Marijke's artwork was also exhibited at the Trend. One day, film director Joseph Losey rang Simon and Marijke's doorbell, introduced by their mutual friend Dick Polak, and asked to film scenes for the movie Modesty Blaise with Terence Stamp, Monica Vitti, and Tina Omont at Simon and Marijke's house because he thought their imaginative environment was a cool film set. It was a swashbuckling, mad mod movie with a great speedboat chase through the Amsterdam canals. It was a wild time. There was marijuana, mescaline, and LSD in abundance, all more or less accepted by the authorities with typical Dutch tolerance. Marijke had an assignment in Athens at the Greca advertising agency for 6 months, and Simone came with her. They were fascinated by visits to the ancient sites like Delphi and lived at the foot of the Parthenon in a fancy apartment provided by the director of the agency, Mr. Skilitsis. After a trip to Morocco and an exhibition in Madrid at Galleria Mordo, where they sold the first paintings they collaborated on, they spent a few months in Ibiza, Marijke creating flashing fashion outfits for the boutiques there. With a grant from the successful Danish folk and calypso duo Frederick and Baroness Nita van Pollant, who lived in Ibiza, Simon and Marijke moved to swinging London, as it was known, in the summer of 1966, where they soon created interest in the community with their artwork and activities.
Hi everyone, this is Marijke. I'd like to tell you about my adventures in London during 1967, the summer of love. Prints of my artwork were sold in Chelsea boutiques, like Granny Takes a Trip, Hung on You, and the Indica Bookshop. Simone and I attended the Rocking Rave at the Roundhouse in October of '66 to launch the underground paper International Times, with mind-blowing performances by the Soft Machine and Pink Floyd. It was a cavernous venue, ice cold, but the music and colorful pattern projections of oil and water slides gave it a groovy ambiance. Attendees were all in costume, I saw Mick Jagger dressed as a teddy boy and Marianne Faithfull in a nun's outfit. Paul McCartney incognito as an Arabic sheik, although I caught his eye. My girlfriend, Pauline Fordham, who owned a boutique called Palisades, and I had installed a gypsy tent and pretended to tell people's fortunes reading palms. We found a great Georgian-style place to rent in St. Stephen's Gardens in Bayswater. Quite run down and dilapidated, but with large rooms. We had 2 floors and plenty of space to paint and store artwork and do whatever. It was a cool place, and we enjoyed living there very, very much. Simon and I had struck up a close friendship with Graham Bond, the multi-instrumentalist of the Graham Bond organization, formerly with Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce. Graham would haul his Hammond organ and Leslie speakers into our living room, and we would have a blast. Me and Graham's girlfriend Jenny on percussion, and Simon on his raita, a Moroccan snake charmer flute. Graham introduced me to the tarot cards, which I found fascinating for their visual impact and esoteric and metaphysical implications. When later in the year the Fool became a collective, that is the name we chose because the Fool card represents creative and cultural activities. London Live magazine published an article on Simon and myself exclaiming, "New art to have arrived in town." 2 guys from Camden Town, Duncan and his partner, were interested in opening a gallery, and we called it Karma. We installed an exhibition of our artwork, and at the opening Graham Bond played his awesome song, "Love is the Law." The only person in the audience was the inscrutable Yoko Ono, who, with her finger on the pulse of hip activities, had heard about the event. She asked us to participate in her film number 4, Bottoms, consisting of tight shots of people's bare bottoms, but we were not really interested in the project. There was no money to take Karma any further, so the enterprise was soon dismantled. The Beatles manager, Brian Epstein, commissioned me to design a program for his Savile Theater Sunday rock concerts through Mayfair Publications, headed by our friend Simon Hayes and his associates Ben Stagg, who later became our manager, and Barry Finch, who eventually became part of the Fool Collective. On January 29, 1967, the Jimi Hendrix Experience performed at the Savile, opening for The Who. On June 4th, Hendrix appeared there again, performing his version of the Sgt. Pepper album's title track. These concerts at the Savile continued until the Rolling Stones played there in December 1969, after which it was sold. Barry Finch started to hang around our studio more and more, and became Simon's best buddy, eagerly helping with chores and as a go-between. He could also whip up a mean curry. Soon, during February, Simon and I were commissioned by Robert Stigwood, Cream's manager, to paint their instruments, create stage costumes, and produce PR material for the band's American debut in March of that year. Barry took me and my portfolio to the meeting with Stigwood and made a deal. I produced a sketch for the decoration of the instruments, which was approved, and we painted them in oil-based enamels. Eric's so-called Fool SG was proclaimed the history's greatest guitar by Vintage Guitar Magazine's December 2012 issue. Originally, the fretboard was painted also, but it interfered with Eric's playing and he had the paint sanded down. When everything was completed, photographer Carl Ferris, whom we had worked with in Ibiza, took some great pictures of the group with their gear in our studio. Visiting Eric's Spartan pad, we all sat on the floor, toking joints and listening to his blues record collection of musicians like Sonny Boyle Williamson and Robert Johnson, with other visitors like his model girlfriend Charlotte Martin and Jimi Hendrix. On July 2nd, Cream played at the Savile Theater. Much later, Eric gave the guitar to George Harrison, who eventually gave it to Jackie Lomax, who then sold it to Todd Rundgren, and he had it nicely restored. Nowadays, one can buy many imitation copies, as well as a miniature full online. On a visit to Ginger Baker and his wife Liz's place, Ginger put his wild and crazy hair on fire, just for the hell of it. Of course, we soon put it out, but if I'd only had a camera. We jam a bit, and Ginger proclaimed me the best tambourine player he'd ever heard. I don't know if he was kidding, but I have got rhythm. Recently, I was commissioned to paint a new full SG for a film about the 50th anniversary celebration of Cream. Graham Nash of the Hollies also became a close friend, and we enjoyed each other's company. He liked hanging out at our studio, and we laughed a lot. He commissioned us to design the cover for the Hollies' Evolution album, as well as stage shirts for the band. We also met Mama Cass at his converted carriage house, who, later in LA, became a good friend and treated us to our first Thanksgiving dinner. The jobs started to roll in. Manager Tony Secunda commissioned us to design the Moves album cover and stage costumes, as well as costumes for Procol Harum stage appearances, with Whiter Shade of Pale's single release scheduled for May 12. Joe Boyd, manager of the Incredible String Band, asked us to design the Layers of the Onion album cover, which has become one of the most posted album covers on social media, and was prominently featured in the closing shot of the film Pirate Radio. One evening, the Beatles' assistant Mel Evans brought John Lennon and Paul McCartney to our studio in St. Stephen's Gardens because they had seen my several theater program cover and were intrigued by the artwork. They were sitting in our living room with a dazed expression on their faces. I guess they blew their minds over the armoire Simon and I had painted in explosive polychrome psychedelic imagery, which was later featured in the film Wonderwall. I nervously served tea, and we listened to the Incredible String Band album on a scratchy reel-to-reel. Then we took them upstairs to our big studio, where they viewed and admired more of our paintings. Soon thereafter, they introduced us to George Harrison and Ringo Starr, and a friendship developed between us and the Fab Four. They invited us to the orchestral session party for A Day in the Life at Abbey Road on February 10th. Which was released as a single June 1st. I just danced around with sparkles and blowing bubbles and enjoyed myself very much. It was great fun. Simone was always the spokesperson for us and interacted with the participants. After that, we were commissioned to work on sketches for the Sgt. Pepper album cover. I painted a rough idea on paper in gouache, the final artwork to be done after approval. Established art dealer Robert Fraser wouldn't have it. His attitude was like, who are these upstarts moving in on our territory? And ultimately only our inner disc sleeve design was used. Nevertheless, the Sgt. Pepper cover artwork turned out great, thanks to Peter Blake, Jan Hayworth and Michael Cooper, who were nice people. Since work was starting to pile up, I asked my best friend Josje, who was a really talented fashion designer and pattern maker, to come live with us and help out. Josje and I had previously designed a fashion line together in Amsterdam called Flashing Fashion. For Barry Finch, one look at Josje was all it took, so he and Josje quickly became an item. Eventually we decided to call ourselves under the collective name The Fool. Our relationship with the Beatles continued. George and Patty Harrison were planning to attend the Monterey Pop Festival, June 16 through 18, for which we designed a coat for George, now in the permanent collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and several outfits for Patty. She liked our outfits and happily did some modeling and photo shoot sessions with us. All this caused Felicity Green of the Daily Mirror to wonder, where did Patty get that gear? That same month we were working on outfits for the Beatles to wear to the first live satellite TV production, Our World, featuring All You Need Is Love, which aired June 25, and we were invited to join them. The event was a happy, exciting experience, with many British rock stars and other celebrities participating. I was playing my tambourine. I am sorry we made your tunic a bit too heavy for comfort, Ringo. Eric Clapton and his lovely girlfriend Charlotte took us to the Hyde Park Pot Rally at Speaker's Corner on July 16, advertised by a cool Martin Sharp poster. Activists Allen Ginsberg and Steve Abrams touted the legalization of marijuana. There were a lot of people attending. It was a happening scene and a lot of reefers went around, but there were no arrests made as far as I know. Soon thereafter, the Beatles wanted to do something extraordinary with the Baker Street Apple headquarters building, and they approached us to brainstorm the project. The agreement was that we would paint the building inside and out and design a closing lane for ladies, men and children to be manufactured. Other cultural activities were to be considered and scheduled as well. Carnaby Street, decorated by Edwards and Binder, was definitely an influence on us. Designers Lord John and Tara Brown's clothing, as well as posters by other artists like Alan Aldrich and Martin Sharp, would also be for sale at Apple. A general proposal was worked out, and as the lead artist, I first made color concept sketches for the exterior 3-story high Apple mural and the interior staircase design. Something out of 1001 Nights for their approval. The meeting with Brian Epstein, all 4 Beatles and solicitors went well. Documents were signed and it was decided to open the boutique on December 7, 1967. John Lennon then asked Simon and me to paint his upright piano, so we stayed at his home in Weybridge for about a week to do that. The piano was decorated all over with landscapes, radiating spectrum bands, wavy color forms, and on the left side the tarot card for Libra, which was John's astrological sign, and on the right side the tarot card for Virgo, which was Cynthia's sign. The keyboard was painted also, according to Goethe's theory of correspondence between musical notes and the colors of the spectrum. Eventually the piano ended up in George's possession. While playing in the garden with little Julian one morning, I came upon a fabulous painted gypsy wagon and suggested to John he should paint his Phantom Rolls-Royce like that. He thought it was a great idea and promptly contacted the Romany gypsies who had decorated the caravan and had it done. So no, contrary to popular belief, the fool did not paint the Phantom. We had some groovy rides in that car though, like going to party at Brian Epstein's with a convoy of cars, including George's Mini, that he had painted himself with tantric images. John was playing Whiter Shade of Pale over and over. He liked that song so much. On August 27, the shocking news was announced that Brian Epstein had passed away, to everyone's great sadness. The ship had lost its captain. That same night, the Jimi Hendrix Experience played the Savile Theater with Arthur Brown. Life went on, and Paul McCartney invited us to his house on Cavendish Avenue to listen to an early recording of With a Little Help from Our Friends in his home music studio. Paul's housekeeper treated us to tea and cake, but it soon became clear that the sugar cubes were not as innocent as they looked. I had brought my miniature dachshund puppy Amiga and took her for a walk through the garden, where I went right through the looking glass because it was full of Alice in Wonderland statues peeking out of the foliage. Paul also had a great painting by Magritte hanging over the living room fireplace, which we duly admired. Linda Eastman came to town from New York for an assignment on the London scene for Rolling Stone magazine, and she stayed in our guest room for a while. Since I have been a vegetarian from childhood and the others followed suit while I was around, I suppose she took this to heart and became a vegetarian herself. I got along with Linda very well, and she took some nice pictures of Simon and me on Primrose Hill. Little did we know she would get married to Paul a year or so later. During September, George asked Simon and myself to paint a mural around the fireplace in his living room at Kinfons. The mural portrayed George and Patty as Music Boy and Flower Girl, as they lovingly called each other then. Attended by a yogi surrounded with radiating light spectra, we stayed at our place for about a week to complete it. Inspired, George was decorating the exterior of the house, and Simon gave him a painting lesson. While there, we also visited Ringo and Maureen, who lived nearby, and I got to hold their squirmy baby boy, Zach. George and Patty were very hospitable, and we had the pleasure of being treated to an impromptu performance by Ravi Shankar and his tabla player. Something I'll remember for the rest of my life. George also turned us on to Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, whose large portrait was watching us from the wall as we worked, and I have been a fan of the Self-Realization Fellowship ever since, and got married at their Dutch windmill chapel in Pacific Palisades to my current husband, musician Don Dunham. It was time to get started on the Apple building project, and John suggested we first design a poster incorporating the slogan A is for Apple to advertise the Apple Boutique's upcoming opening. It was painted in gouache and then printed as a lithograph. The genie on the exterior of the Apple building represented a synthesis of the mythologies of different cultures and ethnicities, influenced by hallucinogens. I did the concept sketches in gouache on paper, and the murals themselves were done in enamel house paint. For the exterior, I used the grid technique to transfer the design to the wall. I drew a large line drawing on the exterior wall by enlarging the 1-inch grid I had put on paper after my concept sketch, and thereafter it could be colored in like a coloring book. The exterior was completed over one weekend, executed by the members of the Fool and a few art students, whose names I forget, except for Mickey Finn, later the drummer for Mark Bolan. Simon painted his gradiating spectrum panels on the sides and the pillars of the building, and also on the counters. Monday morning, the spectacular mural caused a traffic jam, and the respectable burghers of Baker Street mumbled, "What was the world coming to?" Of course, everyone now knows that Apple never was able to obtain a permit, and the London City Council ordered it painted over after 7 months. The interior murals were done freehand by Simon and myself in a few weeks. We always worked well together. Josh and I designed all the clothing, chose the materials, and had them manufactured from our sketches. All the pattern making and sewing of the samples for the commercially manufactured lines we did ourselves. Since Simon and I were busy painting, Joshua was in charge of the manufacturing of the clothing line, and Barry overlooked the construction by carpenters of the staircase and was a general liaison. Apple reproduced 14 of our existing original paintings as lithographs and sold them as art posters in the store. We thought it was important to have multi-ethnic mannequins, and these were custom ordered for the window displays, and once installed, caused an unbelievable amount of racial slurs in the press. The manufactured garments arrived, and we did some photo shoots of the clothing with the great photographers Ronald Traeger and Carl Ferris, modeled by Patty Boyd, Cynthia Lennon, Maureen Starsky, Jenny Boyd, Charlotte Martin, and several other pretty girls. Once all the painting was done, because Simon and I had connections in Morocco, we made a short trip to Marrakesh to buy more inventory for Apple, like musical instruments, jewelry, and accessories, with John's old school friend Pete Shotton, who, as the store's manager, made the deals with the Moroccan vendors. But for some reason, the merchandise never made it back to London. Of course, the Fool was implicitly blamed, the ideal scapegoat. The Fool had moved to larger gigs in Montague Square near Baker Street to accommodate our group. For the opening of the Apple Boutique on December 7, 1967, by nightfall we proceeded on foot with a parade of dressed-up friends to arrive at Apple, which was thronged with people all drinking apple juice. music blaring, press cameras clicking away, and John declaring the whole thing to be well done. The press was in an uproar. Some people thought it was fantastic, while others were appalled by this shock of the new, to quote art critic Robert Hughes. We intended Apple to be a cultural center, including art shows, books, lectures, poetry readings, music nights, ethnic instruments, clothing and accessories from all over the world, rather than just a boutique. Some derogatory remarks have been written in Beatles books about the cost of the enterprise. But John, always the most enthusiastic about the venture, assured us, "Hey guys, it's either going to the taxman or we can do something really incredible." Still, there were some mean-spirited individuals in the organization who did their best to put us down. Even so, Apple was still selling posters and t-shirts with my designs into the new century. The management of Apple was disastrous, but that was not the responsibility of the Fool. We were only the creative idea people and had our hands full painting and designing. Eventually, the Beatles decided to give the inventory away to the public on July 31st, 1968. I thought that was an appropriate grand finale to the whole production. In between the Apple work, the Beatles also needed costumes for the Magical Mystery Tour film they were working on. So Josh and I created those by hand. Although we considered our one-of-a-kind outfits to be another art form, with the medium being textiles instead of paint, such designs cannot be copyrighted according to patent laws. The BBC showed the film on December 26, 1967, to mixed reviews. The latter part of December brought film director Joe Messa to our door, who was working on a film to be called Wonderwall, with actors Jane Birkin, Ian Quarrier, and Jack McGowan, while George Harrison did the music score. The Fool also recorded some music with him at Abbey Road for a scene in the film, but that was ultimately not used. The film was inspired by the armoire Simon and I had painted in 1966, and also, I'm sure, by C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. We designed sets and costumes, and the Fool made an appearance at a party scene. Joe asked me to do a mystical dance number to George's music, which I considered with trepidation, but I did it anyway. The film premiered at Cannes Film Festival on May 17, 1968. It was re-released in a specially designed box I created in 1998, reproducing the original Wonderwall. The box contains the script, movie posters, stickers, picture book, and a single called In the First Place by the Remo 4, written by George Harrison. Joe was a talented, interesting, and sweet guy. Sadly, he passed away in 2002. Another visitor to our blue-painted door spangled with stars was the president of Mercury Records, Irvin Green, a kind, big-hearted American. We were often jamming on our funny acoustic instruments with visiting friends like Graham Nash, Pete Townsend, Eric Burden, Mick and Marianne, or Donovan. When Irvin heard us fooling around, he offered us a record contract. We were surprised, of course, not being professional musicians, but also pleased. It was an offer we could not refuse. We set sail for New York on the SS Rotterdam in May of '68 to record our eponymous album The Fool at the record plant, with Graham Nash as our producer and Graham Bond as our musical director. The engineer was the cool Eddie Kramer. All the material was written and played by ourselves, except for a bit of organ action by Graham Bond. It was remarkable how well the whole album came together, thanks to these great musicians. We were installed in a fantastic house near Washington Square in Greenwich Village, just off 5th Avenue. When the record was completed, and after I finished the cover designs, we went on a promotional radio tour across America in our sun, moon, and stars painted Bentley, to end up in Hollywood at the Chateau Marmont on October 31st, Halloween, which we were not familiar with. Everyone thought we were wearing fancy Halloween costumes, and we thought everyone dressed like that all the time in Hollywood. I love California and have lived in Los Angeles ever since 1968 and became an American citizen.
The Fools split up in 1970 after painting the Aquarius Theater mural, working for Tommy Smothers and Michael Butler, the producers of the musical Hair. At the time, the largest mural in the world, which took 2 months to complete. This was followed by a big vernissage party with Mama Cass and friends from the Hair cast. Simon and Marijke then painted more theaters for Hair, like the Geary Theater in San Francisco and the Schubert in Chicago. Michael Butler launched an exclusive fashion line called Summer Sunday, and for the garment designs, Simon and Marijke made hand silk-screened fabrics. They also recorded 2 more records, Son of America on A&M, produced by Graham Nash and Booker T. Jones, and Mediterranean Blues, produced by Booker at his personal homegrown studio in Malibu with his wife Priscilla Coolidge. Yasha and Barry opened a boutique on Melrose called The Chariot, where they sold Yasha and Marijke's outfits. Pretty soon, Simon and Marijke went their separate ways. Simon went back to Amsterdam, as did Yasha and Barry. Tragically, Yasha passed away in 1988 of a brain aneurysm, leaving behind 6 children. The Beatles broke up, Graham Bond committed suicide, a victim of heroin addiction, and Graham Nash became more successful than ever with Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Marijke spent the following years painting more murals, instruments, book illustrations, and many easel paintings. Mayor Tom Bradley's wife, Ethel, sponsored an exhibition of her work, which was also shown in the Southwest Museum and the Pacifica Asia Museum. In 2011, her artwork was featured in the book Electrical Banana, Masters of Psychedelic Art, followed by a book signing party at the Museum of Modern Art in Los Angeles. During July of 2012, Sonos Studios in Hollywood hosted a month-long, one-woman retrospective art exhibit featuring Marijke's past and present works with a musical appearance by Booker T. Jones.
It's a long story. It took a long time to actually even communicate it to these guys, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of... basically, this is me. The same thing now.
Marijke's guitar art has been displayed at the NAMM Show and Tokyo Guitar Show. The Boston Museum of Modern Art recently displayed the Fools' garments at their Hippie Chic exhibition, and currently the Victoria and Albert Museum has Marijke's art and outfits on display at their You Say You Want a Revolution exhibition. Marijke still produces many paintings at her Art Street Gallery, located on our small horse ranch. She likes to insert mystical, mythological, and metaphysical elements into her paintings, reflecting the process of awakening mind expansion.
Some people may think the 60s mindset was a utopian dream, but ever since the Greeks established democracy, the individual rights of people have been asserted. Even through the Dark Ages and periods of upheaval, this ideal has never been completely squashed, but continues to re-establish itself. As the pendulum swings back and forth, Hopefully, young people will overcome the climate of current affairs to return to the ideal of peaceful coexistence, goodwill and cooperation that was so important in the 60s, like a rainbow in the dark.
Viennent ceux qui viennent, à chacun le sien, à chacun la sienne. J'ai donc le rien qui te sépare, sépare, sépare. Brise tes liens, voyage, voyage, voyage.